All right, we are recording. Welcome back, everybody. I am Richard Lorenzen. That is,
Roger Bryan,
and welcome back to the Raising Millionaires podcast. Roger.
we are happy to have you here. Today, Richard and I were talking, and this was kind of a side conversation that appears to have turned into a podcast episode. And it was really the idea of originally, it was going to be what questions to ask your financial advisor when planning for your financial future. But then you kind of threw it back to me, and you're like, well, what are the questions you ask yourself before you even think about going out and talking to someone else? I was
Yep.
like, oh, that's a good one.
Yep.
So when you sit down and you decide that you want to plan for your future, right?
Yep.
I wish more people would do that. But in general, when you plan for your financial future, specifically looking for financial freedom, right? We're not talking about planning for retirement and living off of like Social Security and stuff like that, like true financial freedom, which is different for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
You have to ask yourself some questions. And Richard, what do you think is the most important question you have to ask yourself when it comes to planning for financial freedom?
Well, I think the place you have to start is you have to zoom out and say, okay, well, what is the life or the lifestyle that I want to have in the future? You have to define what is your life going to look like before you can figure out how much it's going to cost and how much money you need to fund it. So I would start there. What is my vision for the future? What does my lifestyle look like?
Yeah, what does financial freedom mean to me? Because it is different for everyone.
Mm.
I bet you if you ask 10 people that you know in your close circle what financial freedom means to them, you're going to get some similarities, but there's going to be a big variance. Like some people would say to have enough money to travel the world. Other people might say to have enough money to stay home with my kids. Other people might say to do whatever the F I want, whenever I want. And other people would be just to be able to like enjoy life. And it might have a more opaque meaning, but it would be enough to them. So first off, yes, discovering what it means to you. Richard, what does financial freedom mean to you?
I think in part it is having the freedom and the independence to be able to spend your time the way you want to spend your time. Whether that's at different points in your life that might be different things. You might have a charity goal that you want to work on, or you might be raising young kids, or you might have a business that you're trying to build. But the important thing is, whatever that thing is, how do I fund my life? How do I accumulate enough money so I can fund my lifestyle to actually live that out? So for me, a lot of times it's freedom, right? For a lot of entrepreneurs, I think it's freedom. You want to be able to do with your time whatever you want to do, and you have to have a plan to get there.
Yeah, and my personal journey has definitely changed over time. When I think back to like my 20s and maybe even my early 30s, and I think about financial freedom and that concept that freedom just means I can do whatever I want, and that means that I'm not going to work. The longer I've been working, right, the more that I've realized the wealthiest of people that I know, like people that I can see or talk to on a daily basis, they're in their 70s and they're still working. Not because they have to, they could have quit a long time ago. But one, I think for a couple of them, it actually keeps them alive. If they stopped working, they'd keel over and die for lack of purpose, which I think is a big part of it. Another one is that it starts to transcend. You reach all of those personal goals and you're like, okay, what am I doing for my kids? What am I doing for my grandkids? And by keeping going, one, I'm purpose driven. I enjoy it. It's my choice to do it. But I start to see this compounded rate of return based on the experiences that I can provide for a larger swath of my family. So when I think about like personal financial freedom, I look at some of those mentors or coaches or just other successful entrepreneurs that I've had the opportunity to know, and I see as they get older, man, they don't work less, they often tend to work more.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they see that there's some timeline now, like with life, and they're like they want to get as much in as they humanly can. It's not that they step back and do less. And that actually kind of excites me, right? How success compounds. And I know from personal experience in 2018, I'm going to sell my agency. I'm going to go raise Claire, right? It didn't last long before I got bored as you know what. And then I started to figure out that all those financial models, if they're not set up with a big enough vision, right, they
Yep.
do start to shrink back down on you and can start to stress you out if you give up a couple years of earning opportunity. So if you're watching this, Richard and I have our own points of view, or if you're listening, start by writing down what does financial freedom mean to you. I
Yep.
told Richard right before we started filming that I just wrote over on my whiteboard again. I'm like, I haven't written this out in a little while, so I wrote out like a 10-step process to the year 2040. I've always had like 2040 as a vision year for me. Just sounded cool. The 2040 Club, the 2040 Fund is part of Block Capital. But I rebuilt it out and I got it out to 2036, and I can look at it, the number of doors, the things that get sold, the way that businesses grow, and the cash flow. And then like I actually in 2036, like the vision is at college with Claire, having dinner with her friends for, my handwriting sucks. The kids are proud of my work and they have everything that they need. And it's like, there you go. That's financial freedom to me. I want to be able to go to college with Claire for her first week and sit down with the other parents and not like nobody has to worry about anything.
Yep.
What is your vision for those of you that are listening to this? Write it down, because next we're going to talk about how to get there.
Yep.
So Richard, let's say you're in your 30s and you've got a vision for 20 years from now.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do?
Well, now you have to start working backwards a little bit. You have to reverse engineer, right? Now you know what your lifestyle looks like, right? The vision that you have for what you want your life to look like. The next question you have to ask is, how much money is this vision going to cost, right? How much income do I need to sustain myself to achieve that vision? And if you're planning to do that while, if part of your idea of financial freedom is no longer needing to work, it's not just how much income are you going to need to fund your lifestyle, but it's also how much assets are you going to need to produce the income to fund that lifestyle.
Yeah,
so
that you hit the nail on the head on that second
you've
part.
got to put a number on it. That's the next step.
Yep. And the number, like, people do it two different ways, and we talked about this on the previous podcast too. There's all these different rules. My model, of course, is cash flow assets. It can be different for everyone, where I just want to have as many doors as humanly possible. Well, I know exactly how many doors.
So you're in other words, real estate, right?
Yeah, real estate. When I say doors, there's a lot of influences to talk about where in most parts of the country, 5 doors is financial freedom, right? The amount of money. So if you're in Ohio, a door is worth $1,200 to $1,500. Let's say that's $600 to $7,500 a month. If your house is paid off, all of your insurances are up to date and paid for, college is paid for, and you got all of that, and then you've got $6,000, $7,000 a month with no real draw on that, which is hard to do with long-term health care, right? That is a low level of financial freedom in the state of Ohio. And if you're a New York City boy, that might be lunch for you. So it might be a little different. But knowing what the number is, whether it is the balance in a brokerage account, it's the amount of bonds that you have, the amount of cash that you have in an annuity, the amount of real estate investments you have, or a diversified portfolio spread across all of those things, you got to know what the number is. So now, we know what the vision is. We know what the number is to get us there. What comes next?
Well, now you need to build out your plan for how you're going to, so let's say the number that you've landed on is a number of total assets that you need to have. Let's say it's, for simple math, let's say it's $1 million, right? You need to have $1 million in assets to fund your vision. So now you need to figure out.
2005, Richard, $1 million does not get you anywhere today.
Let's keep the math easy for us. But so what's the strategy going to be to get to that $1 million in assets? So now you need to start thinking about, where does your income currently come from? Is there a way that number one, do you need to grow that income, right? Or maybe it's enough. Some people, they may already be earning an amount that is enough. If it's not, you need to start looking at how do I either decrease my expenses or increase my income to help me with getting further towards that goal for the number of assets that I need. I think a lot of people don't necessarily keep a personal P&L or budget, but this would probably be a good time for someone to start thinking about, where does my money go on a monthly basis? What am I spending on? There may even be some surprises in there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so start thinking about what's coming in, what's going out, and what do you need to be saving and ideally investing each month to get you to where you need to be to hit that goal for the number of assets that you need.
Yeah, and part of that, and you've mentioned tools in the past. If you have a 20-year plan and you break it down into 5-year chunks, so you have a 15, a 10, a 5, and then from 5 you want to go a little bit smaller, 5, 3, 2, 1. The
Okay.
primary reason for that is now you set benchmarks at every one of those stages.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can work towards those benchmarks on the short term, and if you hit them at the short term, you have a higher probability of hitting them at the long term. A
Right.
lot of times, especially when talking with parents who don't take into account all of the expenses associated with financial freedom, such as you can have the best financial freedom plan in the world, but if you don't plan for your kids' education, and then 18 years later, you're 2 years away, and you're like, I'm on that goal, and they're like, Mom, Dad, I need $450,000 for school, and you're like, shoot, I got to take a second mortgage out. I've got to draw down on a brokerage account. I've got to cash out retirement early. All of a sudden, everything implodes in your face.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got the vision, you've got the date, you know the number, you're starting to plan out, you're doing it in increments that'll make it measurable. And then you got to start going back through and you got to start adding in all those things that you're not considering.
Yep.
And that's really where talking to a financial advisor or a wealth advisor can really, really help you to plot out some of those things that you're not thinking of.
Yep.
The point that you did make, though, too, is, and I always tell parents this, and I always talk in the sense of parents. If you're an entrepreneur, you have no kids, this still applies to you, is that
Even
you
simpler.
are, huh?
It's even simpler.
It is even simpler. You have less variables to account for. But you have to take into account, if you're planning the goal, is it realistic relative to current income and expenses, right? If you're making $100,000 a year and you've got $100,000 in the bank and you want to have $10 million in the bank in 10 years, something dramatic is going to have to happen.
Mm-hmm.
The probability of that is low, but not completely improbable if you're an entrepreneur, you scale a business and you sell it. So there has to be a linear equation between the points that says, I can grow my income 3% per year. That's reasonable. And then it will get me to my goal. If your income needs to be 5 times higher in order to reach your goal, you're probably going to fail. I'm just going to put period there. I was going to give some caveats, but you're probably going to fail. So it's got to be realistic to your current situation.
Yep.
Then you can, like in mine, my life has always been start a business, scale it anywhere from 2 to 7 years till it reaches a point, and then sell it, right? I've done that multiple times. I can plot that and plan that with a reasonable consideration for it to happen. All of the things being equal. But it has to be realistic to you, because it's not always easy to increase revenue for many people. Right? If you're a career-oriented person who also wants to have a little balance with the family, you're probably not going to be able to go out and start a side gig that's going to double your income anytime soon. Doesn't mean you can't start a little tinkering, start working towards it, but it's not going to happen overnight. So I want to preface that it has to be realistic to your current situation.
No, I think that's right. You need to know where you currently stand, right? So if you look at right now, you're bringing home $10,000 per month, right? And keep it simple. That's after taxes. So $10,000 a month after taxes. And let's say you're currently spending $8,000 per month, right, to cover your cost of living. 10 minus 8, you're saving $2,000 per month. A good tool for you to look at would be pulling up a compound interest calculator online and looking at let's look at how much money I have in savings right now, plus I'm saving another $2,000 per month. And, hopefully you have that money invested in something like, maybe it's an index fund or something. If you assume a historical average return of about 8%, I know I'm deviating from the real estate strategy a little bit, Roger.
Well, no, that's okay, because everybody's got a different strategy, right?
Right. Everybody's investing in different things, right? But just to keep it simple, you're saving $2,000 per month. You're starting with X number of savings already. Pull out a compound interest calculator and figure out, if I do nothing right now, right, just based on where I currently stand, what am I on a trajectory to have in terms of assets in 10 years, 20 years, and 30 years. So that's going to give you a baseline to figure out where you currently already stand. And then, earlier we talked about setting your vision and the amount of assets that you need for that vision. That's going to make it very clear to you what that gap is between where you need to go and, not necessarily where you are now, but where you're on track to be when you get to that point. So if your vision is 30 years from now and you need $10 million 30 years from now, but you're based on your current savings, you're on track to have $1 million, you're very far off track, right? And so now you know that there's a $9 million gap that you need to figure out how to fill, either through making more money, spending less money, and frankly, you need to make more in that situation.
Yeah, in that situation, there's no choice but to make significantly more.
And so, that's going to make it much more clear for you what that gap looks like and what you need to do to get there.
Yep, spot on. As we round out this discussion, and we let's move off of the tactical, and I don't want to call it moving into philosophical, but mindset plays a huge role, well, in everything in life, but nothing less, like that. In the financial planning space, mindset is important, right? I don't know how many times I've talked to people and they look at financial goals and you do what we just talked about. I want to have 10 million, you map it out for them and we're like, you're on pace for 750,000, right?
Yep.
A lot of people look at that and they go, well, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing and hope that things get better. It's not going to get better, right? It's going to take major change. Or they look at it and they go, oh, well, then I might as well not even try, which is even worse than saying I'm not going to do anything different. When you think about the mindset, right, like there's a famous book, Understanding a Framework for Poverty Mindset, that I look at as a Bible. Growing up as a kid in a blue collar family in the Midwest, the lower end of the income stream, I inherited certain mindsets about money that took the better part of my first 35 or 40 years on this planet to overcome. When you think about mindset, like what are some of the biggest mindset hurdles that people face when it comes to financial planning?
You alluded to one of them, which is that I think a lot of people believe that making more money or building more wealth is just out of reach for them. Especially because we did an episode last week about compound interest. I think there is a lot of lack of understanding around just how powerful compound interest is. And so going back to the mindset, a lot of people look at, again, maybe you are that person who's making $10,000 per month and you're spending $8, you're saving $2, and which is good, but you might be looking at that and saying, well, saving $2,000 per month, like I'm never going to become a multi-millionaire on that. But actually, if you were to plug those in, and I don't know exactly what those are off the top of my head.
I'm looking it up.
If you were to plug those numbers into a compound interest calculator, I would guarantee it, at some point in your life, you are going to be a multi-millionaire if you remain consistently invested and you remain consistently a saver. And so there is a mindset around a lot of people thinking that it's out of reach for them. And some of that stems from that lack of understanding around how seemingly, small-ish amounts of money can seriously compound into major gains consistently over a very long period of time.
Using that, starting from a balance of zero and adding $2,000. Oh, this is not the right calculator. Some of these calculators suck, especially the government ones. Okay, so we've got $2,000 saved right now because of 1 month just passed. We've got 30 years. What is our rate of return? We'll go 8%. How much extra will you contribute? $2,000. We're going to do it per month. So,
give it 30 years.
I gave it 30 years at 8%. Richard, if you had to guess, how much do you think you have if you put $2,000 a month away for 30 years?
Say $2 million, $3 million.
You're pretty close. You would have put away $722,000, but you'd have $2.7 million, right? Almost $3 million. So if you're sitting here in your 30s with zero savings today, and you start putting away $2,000 a month until you're 60, No, $3 million
$3 million in today's dollars.
in today's dollars. Yeah, don't get us all confused on.
Right.
Yeah,
That's so like that's an important obstacle, I think, in a lot of people's mindsets is they think that it's out of reach because they don't just because, you might not be the person who's working as an engineer at Facebook making $700,000 per
well, you might
year.
be unemployed if you're doing that too with the layoffs that are taking time. So
There's that as well. But it just goes to show you that through principles like compound interest, people that are not necessarily maybe wouldn't be considered high earning people can still accumulate a significant amount of wealth. So that's one obstacle. I think another one is also you kind of hinted at this one too. Like there is there are some people who have kind of this victim mentality around thinking that no matter how hard I work, there's always going to be something that keeps me from making more money or being able to hold on to my money, and so that's a big obstacle for a lot of folks to overcome as well.
yeah, and when I think about like my upbringing and I think about some of the traits that my parents had in relation to money, there was never a conversation about investing. There was like the idea of savings was having a savings account and just putting money into an account, and they did not do that very well either. There
Mm.
was almost a, I don't want to call it a fear of money, but right, an abandonment of understanding that there is opportunity ahead. And I think that there's like I want to look this up too.
I think some of
What?
that's also a distrust of institutions, right? Like putting your money under your mattress instead of putting it into the S&P 500.
So 34% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck.
34%.
34%,
Yeah.
if they go without their next paycheck, they don't eat.
Hmm.
It's 1 in 3 working Americans. We're the richest country in the world, and a third of our population is living paycheck to paycheck. Right? There could be a lot of mindset issues in there with right, like with budgeting, wants versus needs, the idea of compound interest or savings of any type. 59% don't have a comfortable emergency fund. So now we're 2/3 of Americans basically that don't even have a good emergency fund, which I think is considered to be a minimum of 6 months.
I think 3 to 6 is what Dave Ramsey talks about. And again, like it's also dependent on your individual situation. Like you might be a civil service worker that's practically unfireable, and maybe 3 months is comfortable, but you may be self-employed and
Well,
maybe
well, 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 you were unfireable until this administration, and then there was no holds barred. But that's a different conversation.
that is that is. But you need to figure out, based on your situation, what and it, are you single? Do you have 5 kids? Like you've got to figure out what level of security you need for your particular situation. But you need to have some sort of fund for. I think 3 to 6 months is a good number. I think 12 months is even better. But there's also that question of how much money do you want sitting in cash as opposed to putting it to work in something else that's set, let's say semi-liquid, like maybe an index fund or T-bills or something like
Even a
that.
CD or something like that.
Right, right.
Yeah, just back to the mindset side of things. And if you're listening to this and you feel like you have a mindset issue, and I realize on the video you can see this, but I'm going to say it. It's a framework for understanding poverty by Ruby K. Payne, Payne. This was the 13th edition in 2016 with, at that time, 1.5 million issues or books sold. I'm sure it's well beyond that, but it really dives into the mindset differences. There's right in the middle of the book, there's a chart. And it talks about how the poverty mindset thinker thinks, the middle class mindset thinker thinks, and the wealthy mindset thinker thinks about all of these different situations. And it's very eye-opening because it becomes a roadmap where you can plot out, this is how I think about this, and this is how the next stage thinks about it. And you can make a decision, a mindset shift to think about things differently. The reason that I bring that up for me is kind of like my closing part of this is that if you're not on pace to reach financial freedom, it does often start with mindset. If you're not earning as much money as you need or you want, it often starts with mindset. I
Yep.
will not argue with some people that talk about opportunity, right? Here we are, white males in America, right? We do not have many limiting factors to our success. That is not the same for everyone in this country, and it becomes even harder in other parts of the world. It does play a role. But, like Richard said, if you allow yourself to develop the victim mindset, you're never going to break out of that no matter what opportunity is put in front of you. I will say that my parents probably carried a lot of that they inherited from their parents, that they may have inherited from their parents, and it's something that I am trying to make damn sure that my kids don't inherit from me, kind of buried that with them. Really, dive deep into all of this. Think about it. If you can't even write down what financial freedom means for you, look at your mindset. If you put a number on the board and you reverse engineer it and you use a compound interest calculator and you're 90% off from your goal, look at your mindset. Before you go in and try to cut costs, make more money, are you in the right state of mind to do it? Henry Ford famously said, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you are right. And there is no space more prominent than finance where that is the truth.
Yep.
Tongue twisted myself there, but I think it came out all right. Richard, any final thoughts from your end?
I think the mindset is an important place to end it. I would also say though that, as people start thinking about like what their vision looks like maybe and the number they need to hit, I would also just go back to what we talked about before with first figuring out where you currently are and where you're currently going if nothing else changes. Because I feel like a lot of people don't even have a clear picture of that. Like, what trajectory am I currently on, right? And so before you think about changing your trajectory, figure out which one you're currently on. I think a lot of people don't really, honestly, have no idea. And so whether you're saving $10 per month right now or you're saving $1,000 or $2,000, pull out a compound interest calculator. Maybe in the show notes, Roger, we'll link to that book that you held up, and we'll also link to a compound interest calculator. But start plugging those numbers in and look at where you're currently on track to go in 30 years, and then you can figure out what the gap is to get to where you want to go.
I love it. I wanted to end with one thought off the cuff, just because this has been something that I've been dealing with lately, is that we need to, no matter how screwed up our country or our politics can be grateful for where we are. I have developers in Turkey and in the Ukraine, and this week, so far, right, can't get a hold of anyone. I finally get a message, there's a coup going on in Turkey and the internet's cut off. Mm-hmm. So my developer hasn't been able to reach me for 7 days, which today's Tuesday, since last Monday, just to be able to tell me that. And my developer in Kyiv, completely gone offline, worried about what's going on with him. So just be thankful that we can have these conversations and there's not gunfire over our shoulders or bombs dropping above our heads. And then, that's a great way to end our podcast for the day. But man, the world is a crazy place to live. I'm so thankful to be living here in the United States. Richard, have a great day. Thank you.